distinguished Vice Chancellor, if he's around, Pro Vice Chancellor, Provost of the College of Agriculture and Natural Sciences, Dean of the School of Biological Sciences, Heads of the Environment Science Department, Department of Oil and Gas, I understand, Center for Coastal Management, ESCO, Department of Geography and Regional Planning, Department of Environment Governance and Sustainable Development, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, distinguished professors and lecturers, heads of halls present, researchers, development partners if they are around, traditional authorities, invited guests if the media is present, students, ladies and gentlemen. Good day, Namigada. It is a profound honor to address this distinguished gathering on the occasion of the World Environment Day 2026 here at my alma mater, University of Cape Coast. On the theme, Global Call to Climate Action. I am happy to be here, especially because it's a very nostalgic moment for me. Years back, I can't remember the exact year that I entered here. I was here as a student, pursuing dreams in environmental management and policy. Fast forward today, here I am, back to contribute my little quota to the institution that shaped my postgraduate ambitions. Madam Chair, around the world today, I am reliably informed that the World Environment Day is being held in, I think, Azerbaijan. Yep. Climate change is intensifying, no doubt about that. Scientific evidence available to us by the IPCC, which on 2 occasions I was a member of the Bureau, indicates that global temperatures continue to rise due to human-induced GHG emissions. The consequences are becoming increasingly visible through the extreme weather events that we have in our country, prolonged droughts affecting agriculture, food security, floods, biodiversity loss, land degradation, sea level rise, threatening Ghana's coastline, especially in the part of the country where I come from, the Volta region, and growing climate-related disparities or displacements. The global call for climate action has never been more urgent than before. This call led the former Prime Minister of Malta in 1988 when he appeared at the UN General Assembly to make a case at the UN, culminated in the UN taking the decision to negotiate a treaty to deal with climate change. Hence, in 1992, in Rio de Janeiro, we have the UNFCCC together with other multilateral agreements negotiated. Fast forward, when the Climate Change Convention was established, there was the need for actions to be taken. So Kyoto was negotiated in 1997 in Japan and came into force in 2005 to 2012, signaling the end of the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. That places a responsibility on the 36 industrialized countries to reduce their emissions by 5.2%. Then, in Paris 2015, the Paris Agreement was negotiated. I was very present. Then also at the UN, we have the SDGs. Then in Montreal 2022, we were supposed to have the COP14 in China, and there was a COVID. So therefore, the CBD conference have to be hosted by China and Canada. So we have the outcome called the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the recently adopted the High Seas Treaty, which otherwise we refer to as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ Agreement. It is against this backdrop that today I address you on the theme that I have chosen for the occasion because I am coming to an academic institution. When science becomes a negotiation power under international financial mechanism for climate action. Let me take it again. When science becomes a negotiation power under international financial mechanisms for climate action, because we are talking about a global call to climate action. We need resources to deliver the action. Ladies and gentlemen, the question then is, what is the power of data in environmental diplomacy and resource mobilization? For many years, environmental diplomacy was dominated primarily by political negotiations. Countries negotiate using moral arguments, as I have witnessed this morning. Vulnerability narratives and development concerns. However, in recent times, it has become evident that robust scientific data is necessary for any efficient justification for resource mobilization to undertake meaningful climate action at any scale. Madam Chair, a recent advisory opinion that is within the frontiers of international law by the International Court of Justice has highlighted the legal responsibility of states, including Ghana, to protect the climate system and safeguard the environment for present and future generations. We are therefore reminded that the climate change conversation is not simply an environmental conversation any longer, but an economic, governance, and increasingly a data conversation. In modern climate finance architecture, science and data are currency. Madam Chair, the countries that are able to produce reliable climate data, vulnerability assessments, emission inventories, ecosystem valuations, adaptation metrics, and impact projections are the ones able to attract climate finance and influence negotiations that shape global priorities. Let me share something with you. In my second PhD, I was collecting data in Colombia, and I had the privilege of speaking to 4 prime ministers from Europe. They said, Samuel, do you know something? I said, no. After we had a discussion, they packaged their challenges, their problems from their community to their country level and present it to the international community. And once those challenges are backed by data, they put pressure on the international community to adopt their challenges. These are 4 prime ministers talking to me in Colombia last year. Madam Chair, international climate finance mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, the Global Environment Facility, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, the Climate Investment Funds, we have this fund alone has 4 other funds. We have the Forest Investment Program, the Scaling Up of Renewable Energy Program, the Technology Fund, and the Climate Fund itself. And funds responsible for loss and damage financing agreements do not simply fund passion or good intentions. They fund evidence-based, measurable, and demonstrated needs in a project or a program proposals. This is where many developing states, including our dear country, face a painful reality. We are climate vulnerable, yes, but data poor. Madam Chair, we have increasingly strengthened our focus on the climate side of international financing. I've been very, very involved in that over 2 decades, learning to speak the language of adaptation and mitigation, and improving climate policy frameworks. If you come to Ghana, we have the national endemic contributions. It started as intended nationally determined contributions. Then when the Paris Agreement entered into force, it became nationally determined contributions, no more intended. We have that. Now we have reviewed the first one and reviewing the second one, which we are hoping to submit in Turkey in December when we gathered to negotiate at the COP 2031. We also have a national adaptation framework developed, completed, and Ghana's national climate prosperity plan, among others. However, one critical gap remains deeply visible. That is the biodiversity-related evidence base. Well, all that we are talking about, the resource or the sector that is to respond to the climate crisis is biodiversity. This gap is becoming dangerous at a time when biodiversity is no longer treated as a separate issue, but central to climate agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, students, as a country, the only national effort demonstrated for biodiversity is the Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which of course, under Article 6 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, each country who did sign and ratify will have to demonstrate that you produce what we call National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. So we have done that. Alongside other specific actions for forests or wetlands, to mention just a few. For example, like I indicated, we have Climate Prosperity Plan, but no Biodiversity Prosperity Plan, when life actually depends on biodiversity, but we don't have a plan for it. We have climate policy, but no biodiversity policy. This is an irony. Madam Chair, today, under the global shift towards nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation and integration, and integrated climate resilience approaches, climate adaptation restrictions cannot be discussed without biodiversity. That is why this year, the CBD COP is happening in Armenia, the UNFCCC is happening in Turkey, and the UNCCD, I think, is happening in one of the Asian countries. So these three, negotiated in 1992, called at the Rio Conference, happening at the same time. The question then is, how can farmers build climate resilience when pollinators are declining and soils are degrading? I started my career after sixth form in Ghana Cocoa Board, Cocoa Services Division, trained as a disease control officer. So I know what I'm talking about. The next question is, how do communities pursue climate mitigation when forests continue to decline? The next or the last one is, how do coastal communities, like where we are located, withstand storms when the mangrove ecosystems are disappearing? In short, climate action is inseparable from biodiversity conservation. This is precisely why international financing mechanisms are increasingly demanding biodiversity data in climate proposals for climate action. Madam Chair, as the world enters the 9th replenishment cycle of the Global Environment Facility, Global Environment Facility is one of the financing mechanisms that was put in place just after the 1992 negotiation to provide resources for developing countries, including Ghana, to address the challenges of climate action, biodiversity, international waters, just to mention a few. We are now in June. Next month, July 2026, they are finalizing how much they have asked the international community to contribute to them in excess of $3.9 billion United States dollars, right? They are in a meeting in Kyrgyzstan today. Their meeting started today, will be ending on Saturday, where that pledge will be concluded. So therefore, the countries that are to benefit from that 3.9 billion plus additional pledges will be given what we call 2026. They are finalizing how much they have asked the international community to contribute to them in excess of $3.9 billion United States dollars, right? They are in a meeting in Kyrgyzstan today. Their meeting started today, will be ending on Saturday, where that pledge will be concluded. So therefore, the countries that are to benefit from that 3.9 billion plus additional pledges will be given what we call a replenishment envelope. So Ghana is going to be given, we are going to be given our portion. Yes. So, however, the size of the envelope and the ability to attract additional resources beyond the allocation are heavily influenced by countries' demonstrated global environmental index. Why should I say so? I have spent 8 years at the Council at the United States whereby rich biodiverse nations are allocated little resources because the data set that is out there is not speaking to the problem they have. So therefore, we have to give you small. For instance, Madam Chair, 2 countries may be climate vulnerable, yet a country with stronger data sets, updated inventories, and all other necessary data is more likely to justify a larger allocation, stronger co-financing ratio, and expanded project portfolio. Evidence within the JEF system, we have the formula we use, we refer to as System for Transparent Allocation of Resources. That's the formula that's put there. That's what is used. Allocating finance based on weighted environmental indicators. So if your indicator is too old, if it is not even there, it's scattered, 1988, you are citing them. No, we won't agree. Linked to biodiversity significance, climate mitigation, adaptation potential, and land degradation severity. This carries major implications for developing countries, including Ghana. Why do I say so? As I explained, Ghana possesses globally significant ecological assets, including portions of the Upper Guinea forest ecosystems, wetlands, biodiversity-rich forest reserves, and very climate reliable. Yet, many of these ecological systems remain under quantified in global environmental data sets, and climate vulnerability assessment are inadequate. Last 3 months, a project was approved for Ghana. We were going through, and the international organization that was supporting the country said, oh, well, you know something? We saw your national data, all right, but we felt that no, it is not robust enough. So we went to copy World Bank data and justify why we should give you what we are giving you. 2012, I was present in Turkey where we presented our issue. We were looked at the face and we were told that the data does not speak to what we are presenting, so we should revise it. So we have to revise in order for us to get the $50 million. Ladies and gentlemen, the result is that the true state of Ghana's biodiversity and climate vulnerability is far from what many international allocation systems currently recognize. Call to action. Madam Chair, universities must become environmental intelligent hubs. Institutions like UCC must evolve beyond traditional academic roles. Let me take that again. UCC must evolve beyond traditional academic roles. They must become, or UCC must become, climate analytic hubs, biodiversity data laboratory, ecological modeling institution, and strategic knowledge platforms for international environmental governance. We need universities generating long-term ecological data sets. We need students conducting biodiversity mapping and ecosystem valuation studies. We need research connecting climate science, biodiversity, and policy. Because biodiversity is no longer just for conservation reports. It is climate negotiation capital. Madam Chair, the countries likely to dominate future environmental finance systems are not necessarily those with the largest ecosystem alone, but those capable of, 1, measuring ecological value, translating ecosystem into investor-grade evidence, integrating environmental data system nationally, and converting science into negotiation power. This is the future ahead of us. In conclusion, the future belongs to the countries that understand that environmental science is no longer merely an academic exercise. As scientific capacity is no longer peripheral to the environmental governance study, it is central to it. For that, it means whilst we experience climate impacts most severely, we remain least equipped to negotiate for resources necessary to respond effectively unless we strengthen the data system needed to mobilize adequate, predictable climate resources to combat the impacts of climate change. Before I take my seat, let me thank Professor Miyita, the Department of Environmental Science, that they have produced one of the most promising biodiversity experts emerging not only in Ghana, but within the global space. That person is your former, that's your senior, your classmate, or what have you, Miss Nyemeji Dramado. She's been to Japan, defended the cause of Ghana. She's now defending the cause at the national level, influencing Ghana's National Biodiversity Action Plan and making sure that Ghana's forest policy responds to what she believes is right. Thank you very much.